Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started because we have a lot to share with you all and we don't want to run out of time. But my name is Viviana Valles and I am the RLA and Social Studies coach. Let me see if it's presenting. Okay. From Ascarate, and this is Ivan Castillo, and she is the science and math coach at Ascarate. And we are going to be presenting today on, let me go back, how to create tiered stations in reading using a passage and by skill, and in math for based on a skill. Yvonne, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, good morning, everybody. We're so happy that you decided to join us today. If you could please just answer this question. We want to know, how do you meet the needs of all of your students during station time? If you can just please kind of enter your responses in the chat. Okay, differentiating their work based on their tier. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Soltero, for answering. Give everybody a little more time to put in their response if there's one. Some of the responses we were seeing in the other group was small group instruction, tier level differentiation work. Thank you for your response, Mr. Pais. We saw station activities, we saw intervention, after school tutoring, have students working at their level. Thank you for your responses. Lexia stations, focus small group instruction. Like I said, we saw that a lot in the other group. Scaffolding the students' learning. Thank you, Ms. Powers. We wanted to ask this question because we know everybody is doing a lot. We know you all have a lot of great ideas and you're doing a lot of things already with your students based on their skill levels and scaffolding. Thank you, Ms. Ramirez. And so we're hoping with our presentation today that you walk away with maybe some ideas as to how you can enhance what you're doing, or maybe you're already doing it, or you want to take some of the ideas and make them your own. But we're going to go ahead and get started with reading. Ms. Valles is going to be going into how to tier for reading, and then I'll be going into math. Before she actually does that, we wanted to kind of talk to you about how stations work on our campus. We want to make it very clear after watching this presentation, not everything is tiered. That's a very daunting task. We have just one station that is tiered at our school, and that's usually our digital content station in the upper grades, and then the lower grades, it's more paper pencil, for math at least. There's the guided math station. As you can see, it's the most critical component of our math station rotation, that the teacher is the person who is going to really help those students. We have the adaptive software, Imagine Math and Reflex Math. Yes, those programs will help our students. Yes, they tailor to the student's need. But again, in our opinion, the teacher really is going to be the one who helps the student because they know what the student needs. They can really pinpoint the exact skill that the student really needs to work on, especially with math. They can even talk about the mistakes that the students are making and provide the intervention they need based on that. And then we have an independent station and all the students would be doing the same thing on that one. It would be current TEKS, it could be facts practice, it could be hands-on, something that the students need to work on in a spiral. But again, only one of the stations is tiered.
For reading, it's very similar to math. We have our guided reading, our small group. Then we have our digital content, which are tiered stations. Our independent practice, which could be our revising and editing, the open-ended responses in our literacy notebook, social studies, word study, and then our adapted software, which could be iStation, or if you have sixth grade, the Lexia Power Up, and then Lexia Core 5. So I'm going to be showing you two different ways of how I began tiering my stations, how I began tiering my passage, because everyone, as we know, blended learning is however you see best fit in your classroom. I know that when I first started with blended, I started in a middle school, and Shelly came and she presented on how to tier it based on a novel. So I remember she did the Hunger Games, and she did her levels of her DOK questions based on tier 1 and 2. And then that sparked an idea in me. And I said, maybe I can do the same with my passages. So that's how I started. I started with passage, but the way we looked at the data, the way we plan is the same thing as tiering it based on skill. So how do we do that? We look at our data. We gather the information in our CAs, iStation, in the interim. We look at our Eduforia reports. We look at the highly tested TEKS because, as you know, there's a lot in reading, and there's no way that we can really go back and do activities for all. So we focus mainly on the highly tested standards. We look at the skills, the TEKS that spiral in. We look at the time frame, the at a glance, the IFD, and the IQ questions. Then, based on that information, we group our students. So we group them based on did not meet, approaches, meets, and masters. We also group them based on iStation reports, based on specific skills. Our tier 3s are usually 60 and below. Our tier 2s are 61 through 79, and 80 and 100. Then we do our here's what. So what now what? We were very good at the here's what. We analyze the data. So what are we going to do? And now what? The out now what was the one that we were struggling with how do we make sure that we're truly scaffolding and we're meeting the needs of all of our students. And we do our data digs, where we determine which questions, how they scored on the questions, and if they were assessing the same skill, why they performed better in a certain skill and in a certain question instead of the other one. We look at our unit calendar to determine how many days we have. We look at our glance. We look at the SCs that spiral in, the frequency distribution. We look at our IFD, the introduction, the prior, the during, what we should be teaching in that unit, the after, and the additional notes. We also pay attention and we go into our pacing guides. The IQ, so determining how it's tested is very important to really determine how we are going to be tiering or to make sure that we're hitting that rigor. We look at our clarification document because, as you know, a lot of our TEKS changed. So we no longer have figure 19. So making sure that we're targeting what we're supposed to be teaching is important. We look at our snapshot, the leadership report card, the IQ. So making sure that we're covering all these are very important. We also, what I did for our teachers was that I did little screenshots of the multiple ways that that specific TEK is tested to make sure that we're exposing our students to the vocabulary. Then this is how I start the passage. I know it can be a little confusing, passage and tiered stations, but it's where you feel more comfortable with. When I first started, this is the way I felt comfortable. So what I did was I would meet with my partner. We would go over the text together. We would generate questions. We would circle those keywords and then how we would scaffold this lesson. The reason why meeting with your partner, with your team is important is because the questions that you generate might be different from the ones that your colleague generates. So making and sharing those ideas is important. You're also making sure that you're ready and you're prepared for when you're going to be teaching the passage. So we would always do the genre study. We would determine, okay, so what is the genre? Why is this fiction? What are the components in fiction? We would generate these questions with our students. We would make sure that they understood this passage is at grade level. And the reason being is because the star is at their grade. We wanted to make sure that when we tiered the skills based on the passage, that they weren't struggling to understand the passage, but more that they were able to transfer their knowledge from the passage to the work that they needed to do for the passage. So prior to diving into how we differentiate the skills based on the passage, we analyze it together. And we follow the literacy framework. We always had our read aloud, our shared reading, our stations. So this is an example of how I would begin my lesson. I always had my read aloud. I always had my question posted along with the sentence stem so the students knew what they were going to be answering after the read aloud. We had our passage analyzed, ready to go. And then we started creating our tier based on the passage. So we know that our tier ones, they're at grade level. They know if we give them context clues, they know what to do. So for them, it was easier to build because they knew we gave them the word, we gave them the definition or a synonym or antonym. For tier threes, they struggle still to make that connection. So just to give them, oh, here's the question, find the definition and answer the question. They wouldn't be able to do that. So instead, for tier threes, if we had ELLs, we used cognates, we would put it there so they start making those connections between the words. We would give them images for them to sort and match. For our author's purpose, the same thing. Our tier ones are able to do that. They understand why authors write. So now we bring in the rigor where we based it on the IQ release question. So one question was the author wrote the story most likely to, and then they have to justify their answer. Then another way it's tested is the author included paragraph 15 in the story too. So you're hitting the rigor, those DOK questions. Our tier threes, if we give them the work for tier ones, they're not going to be successful. They need more of the breakdown. So for our tier threes, we would do what is the author's purpose? That was a step one. Step two is who is the audience? Who is he writing it to or for? And then three is giving them those sentence stems and putting the step one and two together to build their answer. So tier threes need more of the scaffolding before they're able to be successful for tier one. For inferencing, we know that inferencing is probably one of the hardest skills to master because they need to be able to answer a question, they need the background knowledge, they need the text evidence, they make the inference, but sometimes they give them the inference and they have to work backwards. So making sure that they're able to do all of it in different ways is important. Your tier ones would have that open-ended response to hit, again, the rigor. Summary. If you give those tier threes, oh, write me a summary about the story with beginning, middle, and end, more than likely they are going to miss something. So your tier ones, you give them straight. You give them the question straight, how it would be assessed. What is the best summary of paragraph 5 through 7? Write a summary of the story using beginning, middle, and end, and then they have to color code it. Your tier threes need a thinking map to go with it. So they would do the somebody wanted, but so then once they're able to break it down, then they can write the summary. And your reflection, you're doing your DOK 3s, DOK 4s for your tier 1s, your tier 3s. If you give them just the question, have you ever been told to act your age? How did it make you feel? What were you doing at this time? If you just give it to them like that, more than likely they're going to miss a question. So breaking it down and numbering it is important. Giving them those sentences to be able to start is crucial. And the assessment. So once we finish with the tiering, then we would give them the assessment. It can be paper, pencil. You can do it on a Nearpod, quizzes, a Kahoot, Google Forms. So why is this important? It's important to do a pulse check and gather the information before they finish with it to clarify any misconceptions that they may have. And then when we share the presentation, you'll be able to see how it would look for tier 1 and tier 2. And I did this one on a Nearpod. So this is one way to do it. Remember, the passage is at grade level. We analyze it together, and then we tier based on what they're going to see, what they need to be able to see in the passage. Any questions on this first one?
There hasn't been any questions in the chat.
Okay. So then the next thing I said, okay, so based on the passage, I was able to do that. I comprehended how to do that. So then I said they were pushing a lot, and we still push iStation because it's a learning path. But I said, okay, what can we do to take it up to the next step? And that's when I started gathering more information. I said, okay, maybe I can start working on tiered stations based on their level, based on how they're performing in that skill. So this is the second way I started to tier my students. So we looked at the data again, everything was the same. We looked at the CAs, the Eduforia reports, the interim, we group our students. We did the here's what, so what, now what. We did the data dig. And then we grouped our kids based on a skill they were struggling in. So all three stations have this, they start the same way. We identify the skill. How is this skill tested? We did the educational video and the essential question and the Ingrid chart. So all three have the same, they start the same. Now, when would our teachers do this? They would do it during their intervention, during their tutoring, during their stations, or one-on-one. So that depends on the teacher. So what is the difference between tier 1, 2, and 3 based on that skill? Tier 1s, they're at grade level, they're able to do it. We found an activity on Nearpath that addressed the skill. The tier 2s aren't ready to just jump in and do context clues. They need more of the scaffolding. So we went to RAS Kids, we got a lower level passage, and I know it's hard to see, but we identified those keywords that they were going to be working on. Then they needed to do the word, and they needed to do the synonym, the antonym, the definition, draw a picture. You can also do like your lead forward activities, strategies, where you do like the who am I, the card sort. And then after they did that, then they need to start previewing how it would be assessed on the start. Your tier 3s need more of the scaffolding. If you just give them this passage and answer the questions, more than likely they're not going to be successful. So what we did was I gave them a little scenario. I highlighted that keyword, and they had to drag and drop. This I did on a Jamboard. So they had to drag and drop an image. They had to drag and drop the the definition, a synonym. So after they did that, they went into sentences. So they had to underline, they had to circle, and then they had to circle the correct answer. And you push it a little bit more, and now they have a little paragraph with the question. So the tier 1s can handle an engaging text, whether it's paper, pencil, or online. Tier 2s, they need more of the scaffolding to support the application to connect to that text. Your tier 3 need more of the scaffolding, but you have to chunk it to concrete interactive activities for them to be able to be successful. Any questions so far? And then each tier has its own post-assessment. The tiered stations in reading should take you about 2 weeks to go from tier 3 to tier 2 to tier 1. Now, how does it look? So let me show you a 4th grade tier 3. 4th grade, when you're doing it based on the skill, and it's a tier 3, so in 4th grade, more than likely the text would be at a 3rd grade level. So you have what they're going to be working on. Sorry, my internet's a little slow. You have the video. You have the anchor chart. You have the why. Why are we working on this? Why do we have to do different activities? So showing them those questions is important. Then you break it down. So for author's purpose, you would have you have the text here, so they would click here, and then they would have to drag and drop to each part. They would practice again, drag and drop. These are the answers. So we're already providing them with the answers. They just have to drag it in. Then the next step is now they have a text. We provide them with 2 already filled in, and then they have to type in the other 2. They practice those 2 like that, 2 that are filled in, 2, and then the next one is they have to type it in. We build the rigor with a little more complex text. They have to fill in the information. Then they practice answering the questions. And then they take their quiz. That's your tier 3 in 4th grade. In second grade, you can do it paper, pencil. You can do it online. It depends. You can do a little bit of both. For this one, we did text features. The text and graphic features for second grade. Again, you have the anchor chart. You have the video. In second, they don't take the star, but they need to start seeing the importance of why they really need to pay attention to why we're doing these things in the classroom, because eventually they will get there. So using the vocabulary is important to start in second grade, even before. And then we have the activities. So for your tier 1s, they would have to, okay, what is this text feature? Why is it important? They would do that for a few slides. Activity 2, now they're creating, okay, so we give them the question. Now they create a title. They tell us why they chose that title. This one, they create a caption, and they explain why they used it. And do they do the same for the next 2 slides? 3, we bring in a little bit more of the rigor. Your tier 1s, they're at grade level. So they're able to read it a little bit more. The text is not hard to read. They would have to answer these questions. And then you have your exit ticket. Why do authors use text features? And then your quiz. Okay, because of time, I'm going to move on to the next one. The resources that we're using. When we built these tiered stations, I know it can be a little overwhelming at first, but we don't expect, let's say, our teachers to do it on their own. We help them build the station. So for example, when we're working on author's purpose, a teacher took one, another teacher took another tier, and I took another tier. We build them together. We do the thinking behind it as of how should it look? What should students be able to do in tier 2, in tier 1, and tier 3? Once we built it, then we use our resources that we have available that our district provides, that our school provides, to bring in those resources. We like iStation. The kids do iStations. The kids use Education Galaxy. But we said, how do we make sure that we're meeting the needs? And they're using those anchor charts and those videos, and they keep having it available to them to be able to progress throughout each tier. And then, do you guys have any questions? Let me see.
There hasn't been anything in the chat.
Okay. No questions? Okay. So Yvonne, you can, let me start presenting so you can present.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to be showing you the math side of it and how we do it at our campus. I really appreciate that Ms. Valle said that. She said, you know, Shelly came in and she showed us how she kind of differentiated and tiered something, and it kind of sparked an idea in her. And that kind of what happened with me. When I first started with blended learning at my school, and we did it a few years back, I really struggled with it. And as a coach, I feel like my job is to support the teachers, and I really struggled with the idea. So when we first started, we were kind of hearing different things, kind of seeing different things like TEKS bins and having the kids work on the standards that they needed. But in my opinion, we were struggling with it because how can I just send a student to work on a TEKS bin or a TEK or an activity that they need help with and there's no scaffolding? I can't just go send them off and do something, and that's where they need support. And so when I kind of saw Ms. Valles and what she was doing, I said, hey, we can do this in math. This makes a lot of sense to me. And that's kind of how we started it on the math side. And so I'm going to kind of go through the process again. It might look a little similar to Ms. Valles'. So where do we start? And so at my campus, we start first with Imagine Math at the beginning of the year. We get the students at their level, see where they're at, and then we want to see where they fall, and then we tier them based off of where they begin. We move students if, let's say, there's other assessments that we have STAR, we have other assessments we could look at. We also can move them out of the tier. Imagine Math doesn't determine everything at the start. And so we then we developed a plan. We said, yes, they need to have time on the program, but the program is not the answer to everything. The teacher is the one who's going to make the biggest impact on their child. And as we saw that last year, right? We were doing everything online. We are the ones who make the difference for our kids. And so we said we can't just rely on that program. And so based off of the student's tier, it decides how many times they see the teacher. They might see the teacher more. And then we also begin to realize the students are not at the same level because of those tiers. And so from there, we decide what concepts, interventions am I going to provide? What skills am I going to work on with my students in the tier? And so we start with the data. It always has to be data-based. I don't just simply put a station to do a station because I'm supposed to do it. It has to be data-based. And so we look at our EDUFORA report. We look at the checkpoints now that we have, used to be unit assessments. And then we start to identify those standards that are 65% and below. So those you would consider, like those whole class concerns. And typically now, as you know, math, we have students with gaps. We've always had students with gaps, but the pandemic has made those gaps even wider. And so we don't really have the time to go and reteach a concept. Yes, we can do it during our POD. We can touch on some things during small group, but this is how we're doing it at our school and part of the way. And so we go through this process. We look at the learning standard breakdown report, and I have a sample of our fourth grade. We identified those areas of need. And so, for example, on this report, you can see there were 3 readiness standards that were below. We identified 4.4a, 4.4h, and 4.5a. And so after we look at that, we say, where do we start? Because we can't expect us to, do everything. What we focus on is we look at that, the TEKS, the frequency distribution chart, and we want to see what's highly tested because we're going to work in an area that's really going to benefit our kids and help them be successful in their assessment, and also that's going to help them develop their skills. And so we look at the highly tested standards, and we then identify, this is where we need to start. We're going to start with this standard based off of the data that we have. From there, same report, we do the learning standard breakdown. We then, click on the little icon to show us the students. How did the student perform at that skill? And so you will see when you do that, you'll have students that are like at 85% for that TEK. And then you have students who are at 0, 25, 50. So you can see just by looking at that, your students are all at different levels. So how can I just provide them one activity? If I have students who they just need a little more push to get to the 100%, but I have students who have 0, nothing at that standard. How can I just give them the same thing? I have to scaffold the understanding and the learning for the kids. And so we tier the kids based off of what they score on that skill. And this is what it would look like. We have an action plan, and that's how we tier the kids and we put them in there. Then we go into this report. We go into the learning standard, the individual response report, because we want to then identify the miscues. So whatever standard we chose, we go and find the questions that address that standard, and we want to see the mistakes that the kids are making, because that's really going to have our station be very focused. Was it a computation error? Do I need to provide intervention on that for my kids? Is it maybe representing, solving? And so we need to really break down the questions, the standards, to understand what we need to provide. So again, this looks like Ms. Biases. We have the plan. We do the here's what, here are the standards that we're below. Why do we think they performed that way? And so what are we going to do about it? And so that's where the tiering comes in. You can see on the data dig, we analyze the different standards that were below, and then we look at the different questions and we start to see computation mistakes. Did they not know what to do at all? And then we develop a plan. We use, again, this report, the frequency distribution, to tell us and guide us as to where to start. Again, what we try to do is focus on one skill at a time. We're getting better at one thing, and then we move on to the next. It's better to do that, in my opinion, than try to focus on everything, because then you're going to get a little more understanding, but we're solid that everyone's going to get this standard all together. And then we also might go back and look at the scaffolding, because we want to see our tier 3 students, especially not being at grade level, what were the prerequisite skills that the kids needed in order to be able to be at grade level. So we might have to provide intervention below grade level. So again, these are the steps. We tier students based on the criteria. We use all of those assessments, different sources. We analyze the reports for areas of need, and then we have the students work on their activities during station time. And again, it's only one station. We don't expect for every station to be tiered. It's a lot of work. And we also have the teacher work with the students in guided math time. If the students are struggling, they can even work on it to make sure the students are on track so that they can move on to the next tier. We want the students to be able to, our tier 3 students, eventually go to tier 1, because that's where the test is at. We want the students to be able to perform where they need to perform. So what I had said a little earlier is we meet with our tier 3 more, and they get to work on these activities a little bit more so that it can accelerate them to move to tier 1. So I want to show you some activities for math and what they look like. So before I do that, just the components, it looks like Ms. Biases. We want to see how is it tested on STAR, because ultimately the kids need to be successful on that, even our students who are performing below grade level. It has to be based on the student needs, miscues that we saw. There has to be a video, and the videos at first came from YouTube, but now we're doing a lot of Screencastify. We're doing a lot of the flip lesson, because we're finding the students actually connect to that more, and we can really tailor a video to exactly what we need to record for them. An anchor chart, then there's practice and an assessment, because again, if I have a tier 3 student working on something, I need to make sure they mastered it before they move on. I'm not just going to assume. I need to make sure. If they're struggling, then I need to work with them to make sure they can finally move on to the tier 2. And so I have a few examples for you. I have 4th grade. I believe it's 4 for it. I made a mistake, I think. Adding and subtracting decimals. So we decided to pick this standard based off of how our students had done. And like Ms. Valle said, it's teamwork. It could be very daunting and overwhelming if you have to do this on your own. So for 4th grade, I'm part of their team. I help them and I take a tier. The other teachers then split the work also. They take a tier, and that's typically how it works. So you can see in tier 3, I want to kind of show you how it's scaffolded. Again, it's not just giving them an activity and having them work on it on their own. We had them adding and subtracting decimals with just the computation. The kids were struggling with the regrouping. They were struggling lining up the decimals. And so this activity is just doing that. On tier 2, we have them then representing and solving one-step problems. It kind of progresses from there with decimals, excuse the typo, and then we go into multi-step problems. So I'll show you an example of what that looks like. So one of the teachers created this one. She did it on Google Slide, and I wanted to show you that. We use whatever platform we're more comfortable with. It starts with the standard. Excuse me. It started with the video. So you can see this teacher, she used a video she found on YouTube, which is an Education Galaxy video, as the teach. And then she had a anchor chart, a couple anchor charts for the students to have them practice. And then they had a little bit of practice that came from that. And then the other parts of the slides are just having them type in their work. They're doing their work on their piece of paper, but then they're filling in the components that need to be filled in here. Just all computation. We have some subtraction practice. And then after this is done, they go into a Google form, and then we want to make sure they're able to do that. On tier 2, this one was done on a Nearpod. This was done by our other 4th grade teacher. taking a little while to load. Okay, and so again, it starts with what they're learning. She put the objective on there so the students understand what they're doing. This is an anchor chart that was created for the kids. So this, you can see the progression. The first one, the kids were just computing. Now we're getting into problem solving, having them identify the parts and the wholes to have them help, understand what do they need to do, what type of operation. The structure of the word problem, another anchor chart. So there's a lot of support. So like I said, it's not just giving them the activity. Our students wouldn't be able to do that. It's giving them the support to be able to do it. So then she has a video. This video, she has two videos actually. On this one, she found an Education Galaxy video to remind them again, because these are tier twos, about the computation. But she also recorded a video where she explains how to do this activity. So I'm going to play a little bit of that.
Okay, I'm going to explain what you're going to be doing for this activity, which is the drag and drop activity. So the instructions read that you will have to drag and drop the numbers into the correct spot within the strip diagram, then solve for the actual answer on the following slide. So here we see a strip diagram that resembles part whole. And so what you need to do is first look at the equation that is there for us. And so we see that it says 19, add 19 and 29 hundredths plus 24 and 92 hundredths. The clues that tell us if we're going to be using part or whole part is the word add and the addition sign there. I know that when I'm adding, according to the...
So she's explaining to them how to do the activity. So this also helps for any interruptions. When I'm working with my small group, the student I forgot how to do this, or they're just sitting there because they forgot. You have the support for the kids. It's a lot of scaffolding. So, the biggest thing we hear, and I'm sure our students don't remember. They don't remember, they forgot. And especially students who have learning disabilities, they forget. They have, processing issues. They have short-term memory problems that they need help with. And so research says, if they see it multiple formats, they get, anchor charts, they get step-by-step directions, they're going to be able to process and then retain the information. And so she has that support for the kids. And then of course she has practice, and this practice is online. So this practice is just like what you saw on the video, so that they know what to do. There's no question about that. And then I'll go into the tier one. So the tier one, these students, they're pretty strong. They're 85%, 90%, some might even be 100, but they need that little extra push. So this is two-step problems using decimals. And so this is the one I worked on. And so we have the objective, so the students know what they're doing. My tier three students are not ready for this. They will be, but they're not ready for this right now. And so this gives my tier ones the extra, push that they need and challenges them. And so this is a video I made. I just screencasted myself, explaining to them how to complete the activity. So they knew what to do. Again, there's no question. And we try to make it as engaging as they can for the kids. I'm not going to play that one though, but we have the anchor chart again, just to remind them of what they're supposed to do. And then we have the practice. What we started doing though, that's all online. We realized, the kids really need to do, they need to actually solve it on paper. So they did an extension. We decided to do that together. We have folders for the kids. So after they finish that Nearpod, that slide, they then have practice on worksheets. So they have to then, move from there. And so our tier three students, they would then get the red folder, our tier two get the yellow, and our tier one get the green folder. So you can see their practice on the paper is exactly what they did on the Nearpod on the slide. This is our tier three, they're computing, our tier one representing and solving, and then our tier one would then be doing the two-step where they're still representing. We want them to represent still, and then they solve. The anchor charts are in there for the kids to be able to refer to, because we still need to have that reinforcement. These are skills that the students needed help with. And so this helps us kind of multiply ourselves. We're not, we can work on one thing during small group, and then we can have the kids doing something else on their own. And they still have your support if you recorded yourself or found a video that will really help the kids be able to move on and work on what they need to. So then I'm going to show you another one. This is a 5th grade one, and this is all online. There was no paper. I know this year we're doing the paper, but I wanted to show you just an online one so you can see. We haven't gone to this year, but this is an example of what we had. And so tier 3, our students were struggling with just vocabulary. So at my campus, we have a high population of English language learners. We have students who are new to the country and they need that support. So some of these students fell into our tier 3 group, as well as some of our monolingual students. They needed help with vocabulary, with attributes, plotting points. Our tier 2 then started graphing the whole numbers and the relationships. Our tier 1 did the same thing, but now they're introducing fractions and decimals. So you can see how there's a different level for each group to work with. So I'll just very quickly show you what that looks like. So you can see our teacher, our 5th grade teacher from last year, she worked on this one. So she had the anchor chart. We have the video support. So watch first before starting. This one, she found one online that would work with that. So they start working on the vocabulary. They have to, work and fill it in. And then they just practice plotting, just simple plotting of the points, what point is it at? And it's just very straightforward. And at the end, then they have their Google form that they have to fill out. You can see that here. And it's star based. There's questions that are going to be like that on star, but our tier 1 students are beyond this. They know the vocabulary. They know how to plot just one point. They don't need practice on this. It might be a little bit boring to them. I mean, some might do it, but they don't need this support. So our tier 2 students, they then went into graphing of the whole numbers. If I'm going too fast, please let me know. So we use the same anchor chart. We really thought it would help all the students. We have our anchor chart. Then we have a video. So you can see it's a different video. This one, again, we were in our beginning stages, so we use a lot of YouTube. The ones we create this year, it's a lot of Screencastify, flip lessons, because we saw it's going to help our kids do exactly what we want them to do. And you can see here, it's now just plotting the tables. It's doing your input output. It's having them match, having them identify the points, and it's a little more difficult. The rigor has increased. And then we get into tier 1 where they're kind of doing the same thing, but now in tier 1 we get into the decimals, the fractions. So this was after mistake analysis. We had kids, even some of our students who are very strong, struggling with identifying the points. And you can see the video just from the preview that it's about fractions. How do I plot a point when it has a fraction or a decimal? And so then they have practice where they're doing that. And the video is that support system for them. Again, so you can see my tier 3 probably would really struggle with this if they're even struggling with just doing one point. And we have our Google form. So I just took a screenshot of what that would look like. There's a post assessment. We want to see if they mastered it, and the teacher gets immediate feedback. We can see if the student is ready, and they can see if they're ready to move on to tier 2 and then tier 1. Our goal, again, is to not just keep our tier 3 students there. We want to accelerate them because they have to perform at grade level. So they move to tier 2 and then tier 1. It's really scaffolding and being very intentional to help the kids. And what I wanted to also show you now is how do we do this for the little ones? And this is what we came up with. So this is a kinder activity. I should say K.2, not 1.2, but after looking at one of our checkpoints, we saw, okay, representing, composing, and decomposing numbers. Some of our students struggled with it. So what they did is students watch a video via QR code. So it's not at all online, just the video is online because the teacher is not going to be doing this with them. They're doing it on their own. So they have the QR code to scan. And again, this involves the teacher showing them how to scan the QR code. And they're actually really good at it, right? And so the kids are watching the video to show them what they're supposed to be doing. So you can see here on the tier 3 level, it's just number recognition, being able to, I have 3. Can I, match 3? Can I write the number 3? Can I practice writing the number 3? Because we have students who are struggling with that. Our tier 2, looks almost like tier 1, but now we're doing a little bit numbers that are a little bit higher. So we did 1 to 5 on tier 3, then we went up to 10 for tier 2. Our tier 1 kids, they know their numbers, like they do. So I'm not going to have them practice writing their numbers. That's going to be, they're beyond that. They don't need help practicing writing their numbers. They don't need help matching 5, cubes to the number 5. They need help with composing and decomposing. So that's how we kind of up the level for our tier 1 kids. And so what she did is she recorded herself explaining to them the activity. She pulled this from STEM Scopes. And so they're practicing composing and decomposing the number 6. And so she screencasted herself using her document camera to show the kids how they were supposed to complete the activity. And she has the QR code behind just on a page just like that. And again, our tier 1 students would use the green folder, our tier 2 use the yellow, and our tier 3 students would use the red. And so it really also involves a student knowing their data. They have to know what folder they need to grab. It takes a lot of rituals and routines practice with the kids so they understand where they're at. How can I grow? I need to move to the next level, and understanding, their learning and what they're doing. I don't know if there are any questions about anything that we presented today. I see Ms. Valles has put the link to our presentation in the chat. And I know there's no questions, but you might be a little overwhelmed by looking at this, but at first it could be. But if you really have a good support system and you work as a team with your grade level members, we get it done. We get it done together. Even our dual teachers and our monolingual teachers, they work together. It's not, well, I'm dual, I can't do this with them. We work on it. So what we did in 4th grade is we worked on our tier. And again, this involves like a lot of understanding and a lot of support from the other teachers. We did the 1 tier and then we translated the other. And Spanish is not my strongest. I can carry a conversation, okay, but then there'll be a word I might not get and I'll just kind of refer back to English. But I went ahead and I even did Google Translate, and then I really made sure it fit and worked. And that's how I helped the teacher. So she didn't have to go and do all 3 tiers on her own and still have to do her English tiers for her 4th grade students. And it's just all about teamwork and getting it done for the kids to give them what they need. I don't think there's still any more questions, but I have our contact information here. My email, Ms. Valles' email, if you have any questions or you need some more support. I see there's a question. Sharon Wells is fast-paced. Any ideas on how to incorporate the tiered lessons with it? Yes, Sharon Wells is very fast-paced. I agree. I know what we used to do at my campus. We don't do Sharon Wells. We didn't pick it up this year. We stayed with just STEM Scopes. So we did do Sharon Wells before, and we did incorporate stations. So I know we had to be really, I guess we had to play with it. I know we did some of our stations, like your skills. Like, I'm just thinking at the top of my head right now, and maybe we can help each other come up with solutions. I know what I'm thinking is if we're doing like a lot of the screencasts, like the flip lesson, we could very well record ourselves showing them how to do skills, because I know that's what we're doing in some of the grade levels. We're falling behind because we're trying to fill gaps, right? And so what we've done is we started doing flip lessons for some of the TEKs that we haven't covered for our checkpoints. And so I bring that, and it's been successful. I bring that up because maybe that's something we could do. So skills takes like a portion of your math time. If we recorded ourselves even kind of showing that, recordings take really quick, like 3 minutes. If you recorded yourself explaining that skills practice to the kids and they can do it on their own, that gives you time to incorporate a larger station section. So I know we did stations in my school in the past and we had to take something out, and maybe that's an idea of how you could do it. I don't know if that was helpful. Ms. Marmolejo, excuse me. I really do recommend the flip. It really has made a huge difference with having to cover everything and getting through all that we needed to do. Thank you, Ms. Sosa. If there are no more questions, I know we finished just a little bit early, but we thank you all for joining us. If you would like and you want to send an email because maybe you don't want to ask the question right now or it comes to you later, please contact us. We're more than happy to help.